In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your front right CV axle on your Kia Soul. It's located behind your wheel. I'm going to use a 21mm socket to take off my front wheel. All right, I'm going to use a 17mm swivel socket to take off my brake caliper bracket bolts. You're going to remove your brake caliper. You're going to use a caliper hanger or a bungee cord to hang it up and out of the way. I usually hang mine off a spring. The strut spring. All right, now I'm going to turn my wheel this way so I can reach my 10mm bolts for the sensor in the brake hose. All right, so now we're going to disconnect our brake hose bracket with a 10mm socket. Be careful not to kink your hose. And just set your bolt off to the side. We're going to disconnect our bracket for our sensor. 10mm socket as well. And lastly, another 10mm socket bolt. So now we can remove that. You really just want that to be moving freely enough, because we're going to be taking out these bolts and pulling this forward. All right, so now we're going to take our ABS sensor out. You're going to be using a 10mm socket. All right, so our sensor here is rusty. You don't want to just yank this right out. You will break it off. And then that's another part you're going to need, or headache. So you want to put some rust penetrant in there and just gingerly take it out like we are. All right, so I'm able to get a flathead screwdriver under there after some persuasion and some patience. And I'm just gonna wiggle it out. There we go. So I'm gonna set that off to the side. All right, so now we're gonna take our cotter pin out of our tie rod, because that's the next thing we're gonna disconnect. Only this side of the tie rod. I'm going to try to avoid having to drill out this cotter pin. And I'm going to try not to damage my tie rod when we take it out, because we are going to be reusing it. So for us, we're going to use a little rust penetrant. If you're rusty, I recommend that too. Use some wire cutters and twist and push till you can get it out a little bit, and then you can use them to pry them out. Now I'm going to take off this nut using a 17mm socket. All right, so now we're going to whack right here to have this tie rod drop down. Try not to hit the boot. There we go. All right, we're gonna take the ding out of this axle nut. Use whatever you got. I'm using a punch and a hammer. Now we're gonna use a 32 millimeter axle nut socket. Put it right on there. Take it off. Make sure that this is free. You can push in on it and it moves. If it's not, you might have to put the nut back on maybe and just give it a good tap with a rubber mallet to free it up. I'm going to lower my vehicle down to the stand because I'm going to be disconnecting the strut and I don't want things to just go all over the place. So that'll support it while I'm taking things out. I'm going to put it right under the ball joint, not on the rotor. So now we're going to use a 19 millimeter socket on the nut and a 17 millimeter wrench on the head of the bolt. We're going to take out our strut bolts. We are still connected on the top, so the strut isn't going to go anywhere. We're just looking to move the knuckle out to get the axle out. Now I'm going to use a rubber mallet and try to free up those bolts. If your bolts don't come free like that, I'm going to walk them out on the head side with my gun and try to crack them loose a little. I'm looking for that freeness when it spins. And we should be able to knock them out. There we have it. All right, so now here we are. I'm going to pull the knuckle out from the strut, like so. And push the axle out. Now I'm going to pull that down. I have a lug nut on my rotor if you are missing your screws also. That'll help keep it from falling off. All right. I'm gonna take a pry bar now and pry the other end out of the transmission. And we're out. So I used a pry bar to get in between the lip of the axle and this where the seal is for the axle. All right, so now that we are popped out, we're gonna just take the axle out through the wheel well. And there we have it. We're gonna put our new axle in. I'm gonna feed it through between the stabilizer bar through the wheel well under the strut. You know, it's a good time to check your seal, make sure there's nothing leaking, see if it's in good shape or not. As I place my axle in, I'm gonna make sure my C spring is, the open side is down. It's usually easier to get it to connect in there. There we go. So now we're going to put our axle in on the other end and take our nut off. And we're going to put it in our wheel. You want to line it up as best you can. Gentle, push it on, put your nut on loosely for now until we make sure everything's all copacetic. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to turn this knuckle and line it up with my strut as best I can for now. And then I'm going to lower the vehicle on top of my support. Just going to use a punch. Once you get your first bolt in there, you can tap your punch out. And then the top bolt will go in much easier. All right, I'm just going to snug this up a little bit. We're not going to hammer down on it, just a little bit. That's good. We're going to be torquing this when the wheel's back on and on the floor. So here we are. We're going to tighten our strut bolts first. All right, I'm going to use my 19 millimeter on the nut end and a 17 millimeter wrench on the head end. We're going to snug these up and then torque them to 130 foot-pounds. All right, so we're going to reconnect our tie rod. I'm just going to push it up a little. Get your nut ready. We're going to tighten this to 25 foot-pounds. All right, so now we're going to put our nut on. We're going to snug it down and then torque it to 25 foot-pounds. So I want to push that up. Somehow ours just fell out. So we're torquing this to 25 foot-pounds. The goal is to, after you torque it to 25, you're going to keep tightening it till you find the hole in your stud of your tie rod so you can fit the cotter pin through. You don't want to loosen this nut to find the hole. You always tighten it. Okay. So that's 25, so let's see where we are. So we're going to go a little bit more. So now we're going to make sure our cotter pin is big enough. You don't want a tiny little thing because that's what holds the castle nut on or keeps it from backing up. So you're going to push it through. That might be a little long. We can always trim it after. Long side is on the top. It makes it easier to grab it because the top one you're going to flip up and over and cut off the end. I usually smash it down a little bit. And then this, we're going to wrap around it. So you're going to take You can also cut it off, but I prefer to do this. Gives the next person something to grab onto when they gotta take it out. All right, so now it's time to put our speed sensor back in, ABS sensor. And push it through. Ours was a little tough to get out, so it might be a little tough to get back in. Making sure your brackets line up. That's not upside down or anything. Now we're going to use our bolt that doesn't have the self-threader on the bottom, like these do. 10mm socket to tighten that up. All right, we are going to torque this bolt to 8 foot-pounds. And we're going to reattach our brackets for our ABS sensor and our brake hose. They're all 10mm sockets, and they all the same bolts. So we're going to start with this one. This one. Make sure that little bracket on the ABS sensor fits into the notch they give us. I'm going to tighten those up first. This one. Hold your caliper out of the way. And now we can put our caliper closer to the front so that we can put our bracket on properly. Fit it into the notch there. And snug this up too. All right, so now we can take our caliper down. Try not to kink the hose. Just gonna rest that there for a second. Slide it back on. Once you get your caliper on there, you're gonna put your bolts in by hand first. We're gonna snug these up and then torque them to 70 foot-pounds. All right, so I'm going to take my lug nut off. So you want to punch out the center cap on your wheel, like that. Just use a wrench or anything you got. All right, we're going to put our wheel on. I'm going to use a 21mm for the lug nuts. Now we're going to lower the vehicle down, put the weight on the wheel so it doesn't spin when we try to torque our axle nut. So we're going to torque this to 198 foot-pounds. All right, so you're going to want to lock that nut on by digging it into that groove. All right, so now you're ready to put your cap back on. Just use a rubber mallet, tap it in. You're going to want to torque your wheels. Now that the vehicle's on the ground, we're ready to torque these wheels to 80 foot-pounds. And I always make sure that I go around one more time.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.